How are you? So nice to meet you.
Stay ahead, Mom! Now left, please. Mom! No.
Really what we were just looking for was common names, interesting names, suggestions for what Meghan or Harry might choose, you know, whether it's a boy or a girl. So some of the most interesting names, I mean, certainly, so it's very interesting comparing on Harry's side, the more sort of traditional royal names, you know, the Henrys, the Georges, and then going a bit further back, grand names like Marmaduke and Godfrey, compared to Meghan's side, which is a very sort of tangible representation of the difference, because you get the Alvins and the Ralphs and the Thomases. It's just, you know, very, very interesting sort of clash of cultures there.
So we've run through a couple of them already. So Harry is the second most popular boy's name. George is the third most popular boy's name. Now before Prince George was born, it was about 10th most popular, and then it shot up to third most popular after he was born. All of the royal names are usually quite popular. So Charles is still in the top 100. Henry, which is actually Prince Harry's first name, that's in the top 20. Edward is in the top 25. So, you know, William is 11th as well. So that's on the boys' side. For the girls, Charlotte, so Princess Charlotte, has been a popular name in this country for the last 30 years or so, but it had dropped to about 25th place until Princess Charlotte was born. And now it's back up to 12th place. So in terms of George and Charlotte, we saw a kind of increase of about 25% in terms of the number of babies that were being given that name after the royal births.
One of the most interesting things that we found out about Meghan was that she's actually descended, distantly related to Jane Seymour, one of Henry VIII's wives. So she actually has her own royal connection there. So it's a bit of a sort of left field prediction for you for the name. Maybe Jane would be an interesting combination of the two. Get the royal side, get Meghan's side of the tree and bring the two together.
Unfortunately, these statistics weren't tracked quite as closely back then. So it was a much more popular name in the 80s than it is now. It's not that popular anymore. The one that's been popular throughout the last 100 years. So, you know, I spoke about these names going in cycles. There's been one girl's name that has never left the top 100 in the last sort of 100 years or so. And that name is the queen of them all, Elizabeth.
How are you? Good to see you. Is everything going well? Very nice to meet you. You're from Canada, is that right?
In every family you see names repeated. People love family traditions, don't they? And names is such a good symbol of that. The royals are particularly traditional, as people might expect. You know, and I mean, you know, Henrys and Georges pop up so often. But yeah, Meghan's family, like any family, you certainly do see that. So, I mean, if we start looking at predictions, I think the likelihood for the baby's first name is that it probably is something a bit more traditional. So if it is a boy, then, you know, Henry is likely, isn't it? Or Charles, you know, it seems obvious, which maybe is, like you say, why thinking about the girls' names is a bit more interesting. I think Elizabeth or Victoria, again, the most obvious. Like I said, Jane, I think, would be an interesting left field choice. But with both Harry and Meghan, they have a bit of history, don't they, of doing the unexpected and stepping outside convention a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe with the middle name they go with something maybe from her side. Maybe they do bring back like her mother's name, Doria, or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go in that direction.
And they're just in a really safe environment, and yeah, so we just tried some colour and we just went, wow, colour, amazing. Yeah, exactly.
It probably depends on how popular the name they choose already is. So if we look at George and Charlotte, for example, the two most recent examples, those two names are already quite popular. And so they put about 20–25% more names on as a result of the royal babies. But if they were to do something like the Beckhams and choose a name like Harper, which is really not popular at all, they could put thousands of percentage points on the popularity of that name. So it's hard to say. I mean, I have my own hunch as to what the name might be.
Well.
And mine are quite popular, my hunches. So in that case, we might see 25% more.
Okay. Can you tell us your hunch, or you don't want to jinx it?
No, I can tell you, and it's a simple way that I've chosen my hunches. So about 2 years ago, I chose 10 boys' names and 10 girls' names to keep an eye on, to look out for, names that I thought were going to grow in popularity. And one of those boys' names was Louis. And since then, we've had Prince Louis born. So I'm thinking I'm on a roll. So I'm going to stick to my lists of 10 names. So I'm going to choose one from the boys' side and one from the girls' side. On the boys' side, I think it might be Arthur. And on the girls' side, I think it might be Alice. So I think the odds seem to favour a girl at the moment. I don't know how people know this. But if it is a girl, I think maybe Alice. So that was Queen Victoria's second child. I think it's the Duke of Edinburgh's mother's name. So
Very nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you.
So this is what happens when we pack up the van. It happens every weeknight. So
I'd seen this documentary on Netflix about feminism, and one of the things they said during...
Well, Meghan's a really, really interesting one, because actually Meghan was hugely popular in this country 20 years ago. So not quite the way Meghan Markle, or Prince Harry's wife Meghan spells it. So she spells it M-E-G-H-A-N. If you drop the H, M-E-G-A-N was the third most popular girl's name in this country 20 years ago. And then it has dropped ever since, and it's now only the 100th most popular name in this country. If you put the H back in, then it's about 800th most popular name in the country. Now, it's a bit too early to see whether Meghan's having an effect and whether she on her own can reverse that trend and start to pull it back up. And maybe in a few months' time we'll get last year's lists out, and we'll see, because it was the wedding last year. I suspect that might be something that starts to have an effect, and the popularity of Meghan might increase a bit more.
Mine too.